It's the BS Movies Podcast with Brian and Shelly.
Welcome to the inaugural episode of the BS Movies Podcast. I'm Brian.
I'm Shelly.
And we're glad that everybody's joining us here for our first episode. We had talked about this a little bit. Shelly and I have been friends for a little while, and we sort of discussed this a little bit. And so we have a very long and varied movie watching history between the two of us. Yes. So we felt like this would be something like, I don't know. I love talking movies with you. Like we do it constantly pretty much.
Right.
So,
yeah. Anytime we get together, it's just talk about movies, not much else. I mean, we talk about life a little bit just to make sure the other's okay.
Right, exactly. Are you still alive?
Are you still alive?
Okay,
let's get to the movies.
Let's get to the movies that we should be talking about. Exactly.
Right.
And so, like, it just sort of seemed natural. Maybe we should just sort of, like, transition right into the first thing that we were going to do. So in this particular episode, it'll be a little bit different than what you would normally get. It will still be, like, a one topic, and we'll talk about whatever it is that catches our fancy at the time.
Right.
But this particular first episode is just sort of a get to know us, and sort of get a feel for what our movie tastes are, and sort of tell you a little bit about why we got into loving movies in the first place.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah, sounds good. And I just want to publicly say thanks to Brian for all of his hard work in getting all this together. I don't know anything about this. I was just sort of like, hey, man, we should do a podcast, and he's made it happen. So thanks for all your work. Yeah,
I appreciate you being like patient with me when I start like spewing out all this nonsense out of my mouth, and you're just like, I don't even know what he's talking about right now. Yeah. I hope he knows what he's doing because what he's saying right now. All I want to do is just talk about movies.
That's all I want to do.
Exactly. So
that's all I want to do.
Anybody that has ever like made a podcast will like understand the undertaking that it is, especially when you're sort of trying to, you got a lot of irons in the fire, and you're doing, so I'm pretty much, production from start to finish on this. So, which is fine. I've actually had a couple other podcasts that I've done. I have another podcast that I'm currently doing called the No Huddle Offensive, where we talk about, what's happening in sports and stuff like that. It's mostly a football podcast, but, football's not always on. So, and so I've previously had a movie podcast. So just to give you a little bit of my background. So, I mean, ultimately, like, I don't know about you, like there's early memories that I have, but the first thing that really made an impression on me when I was growing up was I was, I don't know, 9, 10, 11. I was really young, right? And I had like a paper out at the time. So I had money all the time, right? And so there was an old movie house that was about, I don't know, maybe 1.5 miles, 2 miles away from where I lived. And at this point, like it was a beautiful palatial, like they had 1,800 seats in that thing, back in my hometown is 75,000 people, right? So you don't need an 1,800 seat theater in a town like that. Maybe back in, the 30s or 40s when it was originally created or whatever. But by the time I'd gotten there, like there's seats that you can't sit on because like there's just springs sitting through them. They've permanently closed the balcony at this point. I've never been to the balcony at the castle. It's been repurposed now, and they use it as like a music venue. So it's cool. They did
it's
a beautiful.
Good. I'm glad they're still using it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a beautiful refurbishing of like the inside, and they kept some of the old stuff. Like that was what really sort of I would go in, right? And so they would always. It was like the rundown. I don't want to say like secondhand movies, but like the movies that aren't going to play at the popular megaplex is what's going to play there, right? So like all of the horror, all of the sci-fi, all of the exploitation films, basically like the building blocks of my whole love of movies, right? Happened at that one location. And so I have like vivid memories of getting on my BMX bike and going to see like Life Force is the one that really that was the one I think that I saw that and I was just like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life, mind blowing. Which at 9 years old, you're watching a movie about naked space vampires that are like blowing up London. And exactly. I'll tell you what, it actually holds up really well. So, but like there was like RoboCop and like movies that are very not appropriate for like a 9-year-old probably. And so, yeah, I blame that for scarring me.
Well, did
totally.
the employees that work there, they didn't care?
They didn't care. You showed up. There's like 5 people in like every screening. So if you show up and you got money, you're getting in, you know, because they're like, this is the only way we stay open, you know, it's like these 5 people that, you know, like filter in, you know, to see, you know, like Reanimator or something like that, you know, weird shit, you know. And so, yeah, so like
they were
between
like,
that,
fine, 9-year-old, just get in there.
And then, you know, the video stores were, you know, a big at that point too.
Absolutely.
So like that was the other part of it is I would ride my bicycle around to like all these video stores and just rent, you know, everything, you know, like it wasn't like that. I, you know, there's certain things that I really like. I'm a sucker for horror movies and exploitation, like I've already said, but like, you know, I watched everything, you know, like classic movies and like the new releases and action movies and comedies and romantic dramas and the whole 9 yards. There wasn't really like something that I stayed away from. Musicals when I was younger, but I've come to appreciate musicals now as I'm older.
Well, that's good. I still don't appreciate musicals. I probably should. I mean, I've seen a few. And, yeah.
And so I was also like a film critic for the better part of 20 years for a lot of publications that are now no longer around. So, you know, like I have 100% batting average of every place I ever worked for went out of business. So
way to go.
Yeah. But you know, I will occasionally I will tell like some, you know, film critic stories probably on this podcast that are kind of fun, but like probably nobody else would appreciate them. So whatever, we'll see.
We'll see what happens.
They'll get worked in once in a while, I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, kind of like you, I'm a child of the 80s, so during that video store boom, when that was kind of the thing everybody was doing, my family ritual was, you know, we would go every Friday night to the video store and rent movies. And I really wanted to love horror. My parents, being good, decent people, would not let me rent things like The Beast Within or Let's Scare Jessica to Death, even though these covers were amazing and awesome. And
my mom had those ideas too, but I just went on my own.
Yeah.
So I was just like, and
well,
like,
you were self-sufficient
like,
and had a job. I was dependent on their money still at this point.
Oh yeah,
so,
exactly.
You know.
So you if 10-year-old just walking up with money and they're just like, I don't care, whatever.
Exactly. So I you know, remember obsessively kind of going to the horror section, looking at all those great covers. At that time,
the
artwork
80s
is
horror movie covers. I mean, that's how those, like some of those places stayed in business, you know, was, I mean, like Full Moon or like, what's another one? Empire, which was Charlie Band's first one before that, you know?
No, they were amazing. And
Concord, what was the
new? Yeah, something like that. Like the one I vividly remember, the two I just mentioned, The Beast Within, which was just sort of that silhouette of like this beast figure.
Yeah,
and,
just like and it's like a shadow or something.
Yeah, my little 10-year-old brain was like, "What is happening?" And
did not turn out to be.
No, I finally watched it when I was like 30, and I'm like, this sucks.
This sucks.
What was
exactly.
this? 10-year-old Shelly had a much better movie in her head.
Right.
So since I wasn't allowed to get those rated R movies now, and maybe this will be a separate podcast we'll talk about in the future, but there was a time Disney had some really great horror movies that came out for kids. So there was like The Watcher in the Woods, Something Wicked This Way Comes. So there were some of those that I really liked, but then again,
and they were
couldn't
only PG.
Yeah, and those were PG, but they were scary.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So then I kind of started to gear to the classics, because then I could get around this rule of no rated R by the not rated stuff.
Right, exactly.
And
which was sort of classics. Like, you know, but not really.
Yeah. And so one movie I remember, this is the movie I always say made me fall in love with movies, was The Trouble with Harry, which is a Hitchcock comedy.
Such a good movie.
From 1955 that I just remember like the Technicolor in that really impressing me.
Yeah,
like it's set in New England
the
and
shots
it's
are beautiful.
Gorgeous. Yeah.
Like it just has that wonderful dark humor that like Hitchcock is like, this is a comedy for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure it's a comedy.
Absolutely.
But it's just like
a comedy about a corpse.
Yeah, it's a comedy about a corpse that just won't disappear,
right,
you know?
Right. And so that one has always been the one that I sort of say that's when I fell in love with movies. Now, then I did have, and people will kind of find this out, I do have a weird experience in that in like the 90s, my family joined a church that we weren't allowed to watch movies or television.
Oh, wow.
So I do have this like decade long, I was in this church for a decade.
Wow. Okay.
Of like, so there are going to be some holes in kind of my movie knowledge, just because I didn't see those movies for a long time. Since I've been out of that church and trying to, obviously my love of movies never went away, but it was like I wasn't allowed to.
Right.
So now it's like trying to catch up and, but I have always loved movies and study and think about them. And like you said, every time we get together, it's like, okay, you're still alive. Good. Right. And now let's talk about movies.
Exactly.
So, and I really did gear towards horror, which my father and always finds sort of fascinating because he doesn't understand where it came from.
Right.
But I sort of blame him because I have a very vivid memory. He does not remember this. He and I have talked about it. When I was about 11, Carrie was on TV and it was like Halloween night. And he was like, oh, this is a really good movie.
It is a really good movie.
Yeah. And he just like left it on and, kind of helped continue this lifelong love of horror that I have. And so I blame him. He doesn't remember that, but it's a very
I know
vivid.
Exactly where I told you where mine comes from.
Yeah.
Is just, like the gutters of like, the dime store movie theaters and stuff like that. So yeah, all right. Well, and so what we figured we would also talk about a little bit is a few of the movies that like really sort of stand out to us. It's hard to say this is my favorite movie, but there's plenty of... Yeah,
because I think as kind of as horror or even movie nerds, not even horror movie nerds, it is hard to say like this is my all-time favorite movie because it kind of changes. It changes on the mood you're in, but there are some standbys that I think that's what we're going to be talking about is like the ones that are always on the list. Like these never change.
Right. These are movies that I've seen so many times, just countless times. Like I can't even tell you how many times I've probably seen these movies. So we'll just sort of get right into it. And it's a perfect segue because like the first movie I was going to talk about is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I'm setting the tone for the podcast right away. So that's actually how Shelly and I met. We have a mutual friend who puts together like screenings and stuff like that here in the Phoenix metro area. And so like Shelly had come to the screening of Texas Chainsaw. And I think we'd sort of like said hello to stuff and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think we had seen each other in passing.
Right,
but that
exactly.
Was like...
But it wasn't, where we'd really sort of stopped and had a conversation or whatever.
Right.
And so it was the...
40th anniversary screening.
Okay, so the 40th anniversary screening of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which, like I said, I've seen. I'm not exaggerating when I say I've seen this movie 50 times. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not. Like, there's just no way. I've a million. Like, I love this movie so much. I watch it just about every year,
So what do you love about it? What is it? What is it about Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
So I love the way that it sort of sets the tone, where it's just, something's a little bit off, even, as the movie's starting, and they sort of give you a little bit of the background of like, this is the horrible thing that happened. And then it just goes right into the, the kids on the freeway, which is such a cliche now. But like back then, that was something that was not really done on a regular basis.
Right. Well, and it's really, really gritty looking. Like it feels like you're watching this really happen.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Kind
it feels like reality. That's what I always tell people. It feels like reality television.
Yeah. It feels like this is something you've seen on the news, that this horrible event happening to these teenagers, which now has become kind of this trope in horror movies that they do this a lot. But in 74, when this was made,
it was revolutionary.
Right.
But like what I think I love the most about Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the fact that like it leaves it up to you. And so like one of the things that I think is like a cardinal sin right now for movies is, in like horror movies are guilty of this as any, is like they want to show you everything on the screen. Like we paid $1 million for these special effects, so I want you to see the chainsaw going through the guy's bone, right? And just like make it as gory and violent and as cringeworthy, so we can get as many people like turning their eyes away. And like the thing that really like set Texas Chainsaw Massacre apart for me is like it is all in your head pretty much, because you don't know what happens pretty much to anybody. And like,
No.
it's sort of like, it's hinted at and they sort of like let you know what's going on, but like, you have to imagine everything that's happening.
No, because that's that great scene when you first see Leatherface.
Yeah.
It was like he hits the girl in the head with the hammer
Yeah,
and then just slams
the
that door, and you're just like,
beautiful.
what the fuck just happened?
Oh, yeah, and that's like your first introduction to anything really, really being off. You know, like they picked up the hitchhiker earlier who had like cut his hand, but like...
Yeah, and that's just sort of weird, and I think they kind of move on as like, okay, well, that happened, and now let's...
We'll just live, you know?
But this is really...
Yeah, and so... And it just keeps going like further and further down the rabbit hole, and like, it plays to everything that I love about horror movies. It's dark, it's like... I always feel like horror movies are pretty thoughtful, you know, and so like, you know, maybe not so much anymore for this particular idea, but in the moment of like 74, like this is sort of like a revolutionary thing. So revolutionary that it changed the way that these movies were made pretty much going forward for the rest of time, you know? And so like, maybe it gets too much credit for being so like effective or whatever, but like I've literally seen this movie. Like I did a film study class and they were showing Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and like the thing that like really, because I'd seen the movie, you know, 100 times, so I'm basically just watching everybody's reaction because nobody else had seen it, you know?
And you knew what was happening.
I know exactly what's happening. I've seen this movie 100 times at this point, you know, and so people are just like, they're cringing. And they're like, look, and they can't even look at the screen. And like, some people got up and left, you know, and like they came back to the film class, like whenever it was, the next day or the next week or whatever it was. I don't remember exactly how often it was. Like they're just talking about like these horrible things that had happened on the screen and the chainsaw going into them and like and I'm like, you know, none of that really happens, right?
That's all
like
in your head.
You made that all up. You made up the soundtrack and the sights and the gore and everything. And so I love that it leaves it up to you. And just sort of like, another thing that I sort of love about horror movies is it shows, like we talked about this a little bit right before the podcast even started, about like Cthulhu mythology, where it's like it shows sort of the insignificance of humanity, you know, and so like horror movies I feel like illustrates that really well, you know, and sort of, you know, lets you know like everybody dies, you know, so it's just one of those movies that has really affected me over the years, and like I got to meet a good friend out of you know, seeing it,
absolutely,
like on the 75th time or whatever that I saw it, you know. And I'm sure that was certainly not your first time seeing.
No, I had seen it a few times, but I think that was my first time. So let me ask you this, since you're the expert.
Yeah.
That screening we saw kind of had that narration at the opening, which I don't think is a part of maybe the original screening.
So I guess what happened was there were two prints of the because when we talked about it, it sort of made me think about it a little bit. And I'm like, maybe she was right about maybe there being like one where there's one without and one with.
Right.
And so like I went back and I looked, and there was in fact two versions that they rotated around in the drive-ins where they would. There was one because like it initially came out and the people that were showing it were like, it's too confusing. Like it just starts with the like on the road, you know, and they like, well, I don't even know what's going on, you know? And so like they, for the ones that were a little less, you know, imaginative and what it, you know, they're just like, okay, well, we'll put this little stinger right on the very front of it that says, this is sort of what happened.
Yeah.
You know?
Which I think it's good. I also think you could argue that it sort of puts you in the sense that you're watching like a PBS news
like
documentary or like a Frontline or something about.
But when you find out what happened to these teenagers.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So I thought, I think that's a great movie. Good choice. Yeah,
perfect.
It's a fantastic movie. All right. So my movie, that we'll first talk about is Psycho. So kind of going along right with Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Another classic that I love.
To me, Psycho is just a perfect movie. I think just from the directions, the choices that are made, the music. I mean, just immediately Herman's.
The casting,
but Herman's score right there at the beginning of the movie just immediately puts you on edge.
Yeah, you're
like
immediate. Like you don't even know why you're tense at the very beginning. You know,
because you don't know a lot. Like if you look up and you can find on YouTube like the old trailers that Hitchcock put out before the movie started,
right,
or before the movie was screened and released.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of these like great little things of the mystery, and he's like touring the house and the grounds of the Bates Motel, and so
I think I've
you're
seen that.
sort of you're sort of on edge of what is this even going to be about.
But you would never guess that something horrible happened
right in this quiet little roadside motel,
so
and it's so great because you don't know what's happening, and this was also, and this may be the first time this happened in film. Like theaters weren't allowed to let people in.
Yeah.
After the first like 10, 15 minutes. And it may not have been that long, but after that opening credits, theaters weren't allowed to let people in because Hitchcock wanted you to experience it right from that get-go.
Right.
And so I think it's just a perfect movie. Spoilers, if you haven't seen Psycho, you should.
I never feel like I'm giving spoilers on a movie that is, 65
exactly.
years old now, right?
Yeah, it was released in 1960, so we're a few years past that.
Yeah, exactly. So you know what? It's your own damn fault. But there's spoilers coming up if you don't want it ruined.
Exactly. I mean, this is the first time, you know, the person... Janet Leigh's character, Marion Crane, who's sort of your main character who you're sympathizing with, is murdered horribly within the first 20 minutes of the movie. And so then you're kind of forced to sympathize with Norman Bates. Yeah. And I think, I feel like that's probably the first time that happened in movies where now you're sort of forced to...
It's like a transferal.
This and it's really interesting, and I think the movie is just
super
fantastic.
Subtle, and you don't realize the first time you're watching it, you don't realize that Norman is the main character, and because he's not even in the first 20 minutes of the movie.
No, he's just sort of this
he's an afterthought.
He's just sort of this guy that's at the hotel that like helps her out.
The first time you're watching it, you're finally like, okay, she's going to get away, right? Yeah. Like she's like taking a breath. There's nobody following her. You know, she's gotten far enough away at this point that like if somebody was coming, you know, and like it's not happening. And so she pulls off on the side of the road. You know, she's tired, and like you think, okay, she took the money. She got away clean. Right. And now the movie's going to start.
Right. Well, and then she sort of, when she has that conversation with Norman, she's feeling a little guilty and realizes she should give the money back. So kind of, she does have this moment, you know, of retribution where she realizes the sin that she's committed is wrong. Right. And so now I'm going to make up for it. And then she still gets murdered.
Right, exactly.
You know, so even though she was going to... you know, atone for her sin.
Too late.
Yeah. And, but I do remember, and then you sort of feel panicked when he's sinking her car when he's trying to hide the crime that's happened. And he's sinking that car into the bog and he's standing there watching it and you feel panicked for him. You're like, this guy's covering up a crime.
Right.
But when the car sort of stops,
and he's kind of a bad guy at this point because now you are definitely, you know, like, oh, you're covering up for your mom. Okay, I get it, you know, but like, you know, he's basically signing off on this at this point and saying like, okay, you know, I'm just going to clean this up, and you feel like almost terrified for Norman
you do.
In that moment.
Well, you do because you're forced to. This is the person I have to, or this is the character I'm forced to kind of identify with. Right. And he's covering up this horrible crime, but you're sort of like, well, I don't want him to get caught. Poor guy, he's just trying to help out his
mother.
Just trying to help his mom.
Yeah.
And
he's such a sweet boy. Wouldn't even harm a fly. Yeah, exactly.
So Psycho's a perfect movie. That's another one. You know, you mentioned people seeing things that weren't there in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's the same thing with the shower scene in Psycho. Right. You know, I even remember talking to my mom about this because she was a teenager when this was released, and she was on a date, and she said like she left her fingernail prints in like her date's arm. She was so terrified. But like she said, she remembers, she was like, no, the knife goes into her. And I'm like, for sure. No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, the genius of
There's no nudity.
Those cuts. Yeah. People think they see her fully naked.
Yep.
She's not.
She's not.
You know, you kind of have your imagination kind of fills in these spots of what you think you're seeing and you're really not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, of course the score's there. So you are, but again, that score's so great because it just keeps you on edge.
Right.
And
what I always thought was great about it is when it lulls you, when you're just like, oh, it's finally, maybe it is finally light. And then it's just like, nope, even worse.
No. And it's such a great movie. I know Hitchcock got a lot of flack for making something that just was so offensive and people
violent
and
people thought it was dirty.
It's kind of and it is the grandfather of slasher movies and horror movies.
For sure.
Because it is such a great thriller, and you look at a movie like Peeping Tom that came out at the same time and essentially ruined Michael Powell's career,
which I think is actually, I actually prefer Peeping Tom to Psycho. They're both classic, wonderful
great movies.
They're both definitely worth watching. And Peeping Tom, I think the reason I like recommending Peeping Tom more than Psycho is because everybody knows what happens in Psycho now. Even if you haven't seen it, you know what happens in Psycho.
Right, yeah. Psycho is so
Peeping Tom,
a part of our culture.
Peeping Tom, I feel like it's been under the radar enough that you're not going to see it coming. It's just... Right. Yeah.
Well, and Peeping Tom is one...
the first time I saw it.
Right, exactly. Me too.
And I was already at that point... somebody who had seen, probably 5,000 movies, more maybe even, and did actually write for a living, at a time, making, film criticisms. And so anytime that I have something
anytime
like that where I'm just surprised, I'm just oh, that's the most wonderful thing,
Right. No, so that's my love of Psycho. I think if that's, that is where my love of horror definitely comes from. So sure. I always go back to that one. I think it's just great. I've seen it.
And the pacing is flawless.
I don't know how many times, but it's every time I watch it, I find something new or interesting in it. One of the things, I think it was the last time I watched it, which was just a few months ago. I think it's really interesting. There's the scene when Marion's getting away when she's driving the car from Phoenix to California, and she's having these conversations in her head.
Yeah. Trying to justify or whatever.
Right. But then you realize, she's imagining what these conversations are going to be. She stole the money on Friday. She's driving on Friday night.
Right.
And she's imagining what her boss, whom she stole this money from, is saying, on Monday when she gets back to work.
Maybe
which I
not
think
even Monday morning.
Yeah. Which
it was
I think
a long weekend or something.
Yeah. So I think I think that's an interesting... Yeah. I think that's really interesting in and of itself, that this is her imagining this monologue, conversation that she's trying to think about what are the ramifications going to be of this this sin that she's committed. Psycho's fantastic.
Quick note to just put an exclamation point on Psycho. So I moved here in 1997 or 98. I don't remember the exact year. I was here 3 days and I drove downtown so I could see it back when there was nothing downtown.
Right.
So just so I could see the Valley Ho where they shot the opening
Westward
scene
Ho.
or Westward Ho, excuse me.
Yeah.
For the opening scene for Psycho.
Right.
Because I was just and it's legitimately they pan right into that actual window. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So I feel like we haven't talked about killing people enough. So my next movie is Unforgiven.
Okay.
So Unforgiven to me, this probably is when people really put the screws to me. This is probably what I actually will tell people is my favorite movie.
Okay. Good choice.
But
great movie.
I mean, just the whole thing, it's just the whole thing is just so heartbreaking from the beginning to the end. Where Bill Money really doesn't want to go out and take this bounty, but. He hasn't, I forget what it was, a dry goods or farm or something, but it wasn't doing good. That's what I remember.
Right. He tried to go legit.
He tried to go legit and it wasn't going well.
Right.
So he gets talked into it and he takes his old buddy Ned, and at this point they're old men and they lived that, rugged cowboy lifestyle and they were assassins. So the fact that they got into old age, and were actually trying to go legit sort of speaks to, them sort of understanding that this world is passing them by.
Well, it's a great take on that. We're going to do this one last job, and then we'll be okay. Where they've sort of been, it's a little different than that. They're sort of been retired for a while, but this is an opportunity for them to make some money and, kind
able
of
to,
get out of that and really
get out
retire
of it for good.
'cause,
Yeah.
Bill Money has some small children at this point
Right.
too,
And his wife
and
is
the
passed
wife
away.
the wife has passed, so he is in a kind of desperate situation.
Right. So, against his better judgment and feeling that he's a different person now because of his wife and her tutelage, still goes out and, decides that he's going to do this job. And, ultimately it becomes personal once they actually get to where they're going to.
Right.
And to me, just the interactions between, Little Bill and English Bob, right before money gets there, when he's just basically, making an example out of the first guy that came to town, to collect this bounty, on the guy that cut up the prostitute. He's like, I'm not going to have this sort of lawlessness in his town. And he's legitimately sort of coming from a reasonable, viewpoint. And, part of the reason that I always love this movie is that, I see it from Little Bill's perspective and I go, you know what? I don't feel like he's wrong, right?
Right.
I don't feel like Bill Money's wrong when he does what he does at the end of the movie.
Right.
But, I never felt like he's like a ruthless guy, Little Bill's ruthless and he will, really,
He's not a villain just to be a villain.
Right.
He does have some...
he has a
reason.
he has morals and a philosophy, and that's, if you've got a philosophy and if you seem reasonable, that makes you the scariest person in the world, because
absolutely.
This guy's justified. He's the sheriff. He can do whatever he wants in the Old West, and so just the four of those guys, just chewing the scenery together is unbelievable, and it still gets me to this day, and so I'll never forget the first time I saw this movie. I'm watching it in a big movie theater, and I can tell that the people that I am watching it with do not understand what this movie is about at all, right? They're just when is something going to happen, or why, I don't understand what's taking so long. Why don't they just go to the town, or whatever? Because they want to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, right?
Yeah,
and that's
they
not
want
what
some
this
action,
is.
and it's not. It's much more thought-provoking and
so at the very end of the movie, they start cheering when he starts shooting up the bar, and me, I'm sitting there almost crying because I'm just he felt like he wasn't going to go there again, right?
Yeah,
and he felt like he was a different person, and it just finally he just snapped, and he's just I remember how to do this, and so the thing that I love about the very end of the movie is not so much the shootout, because the shootout is pretty spectacular, right? Mm-hmm. But I love when the writer starts asking him all the questions about the shootout,
right? And
he's just like, well, you shot Little Bill first because he was the best gunman. He's like, I guess I got lucky, he's like, but then you shot this guy, and he's just like, and maybe I'll shoot you next, letting him know that he's had a night and he's not having any shenanigans from anybody.
Yeah, he doesn't want this little prissy guy in his face wanting to figure
and then
out,
ultimately,
analyze his play-by-play when he didn't have one.
Right.
There was no great military strategy to it.
He tried to kill everybody, and he did, and so sometimes, just the element of surprise like that, and walking in and just catching everybody off guard, and them maybe not feeling maybe underestimating him a little bit and thinking well, we kicked the shit out of this guy 3 days ago, and killed his buddy, so maybe he's not as tough as he thinks he is, so it's just sort of everything comes to a head, and so and it's so heartbreaking at the end of the movie. And I love it when it gives the little epilogue at the end that says he went to his children and did his dry goods business or whatever and was never heard from again, because I'm just he really was that new person. And he gave in one time, but he was not going to be that person again.
Yeah, he didn't, which was sort of, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I think that was sort of his fear throughout the movie is that if I kind of if I open this door again, is it going to ruin
Can I close it
what
again?
I've established? And it is a nice kind of sweet ending that then you get that he was able to close the door again, that he is okay. You can have this.
You can
peace.
Be satisfied at least.
That he's okay with his kids. He raised his kids, and
exactly.
Yeah, it's a great movie. Yeah. Great movie.
All right.
Good choice. All right. Well, my next choice on my favorite movies is Fight Club.
Ooh, good one.
Which came out in 99, which was the reason I picked Fight Club was that was the movie sort of that really made an impression on me after I left that church and started watching movies again.
Right.
I just thought it's just amazing. I
Right.
really, really love that movie. I think Brad Pitt's amazing in it. I think Fincher's direction's fantastic. I think Edward Norton's really great in it. I think it speaks to a society, and we're both Generation X.
Yeah.
That we're sort of the beginning of, people kind of complain about millennials and stuff and their entitlement, but I think it started with our generation.
Oh, sure it did.
And so I feel like Fight Club kind of explores that.
Right.
Now I'm not a guy.
Right.
So I don't know what it's like to be a guy.
Right.
But I think for men especially, I think maybe you do have some kind of evolutionary need to fight. And obviously Fight Club explores that.
Yeah.
And because we didn't have anything, the baby boomer generation had Vietnam. Before that, you had World War II, World War I. Men in modern history have always been fighting for something that they feel is this very moral, just cause.
Right.
But then you get down to Generation X.
And those things don't really happen anymore.
Yeah. There wasn't. We were kind of in the Cold War, and it was very scary. And like I remember, my junior year of high school was like during the first Iraq War, and that was sort of a scary time.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like that ever rose to the level of like a Vietnam or Korea or World War II.
Well, on their side maybe, but which. Let's not get into politics.
Yeah. But so I think Fight Club sort of speaks to this maybe primal instinct of a need to fight,
like
and
yearning,
because there's that great scene when the narrator and Tyler Durden are talking. They're in the bathroom and they're kind of cleaning up, and they were like, "Well, my dad left. I'm a child of divorce. I don't know how to be a man. I don't know how to be a husband. I don't know how to be a father because this is what my father did to me." And I think you do sort of have that generation of men that don't know how to be men.
Yeah.
And so Fight Club kind of explores, well, what if they did have this thing?
Right.
And I think it's a great movie. I've read the book by Chuck Palahniuk. I think the book's fantastic. So I just really love that movie. I mean, my husband...
I read the book, I was like, you can't adapt this movie. It's impossible, right?
Yeah, no, and I think they did a really
amazing.
Good job. Yeah, I think it's really great. And
kept the secret to the...
the reveal is fantastic.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and, my poor husband, when he and I first started dating... I was watching this movie obsessively. So, he'd come over and we'd hang out or whatever, and I'm like, let's watch Fight Club. And he'd be like... fine, so poor guy, he's probably seen it more than he's cared to, but it's definitely
what I sort of
one of my favorite movies.
What I really liked about Fight Club, well, I mean, there's a lot to like about Fight Club, but I liked that it wasn't a hit when it first came out. It found its audience way later on DVD. I'll never forget, I was in Hawaii at the time, and the only thing that we did inside the entire week that I was there is we went and saw Fight Club on opening night. So we were on the beach, Fight Club, on the beach,
Yeah.
And so, here's another one where I was just I'm watching sort of the reaction of the audience, and I'm like, they don't understand what this movie's about at all.
No, because it is really bizarre.
First of all, they just sort of keep dragging you along on a chain. You don't even realize it the whole time.
Right. Because the narrator, the Edward Norton character, you don't know, from the beginning of the movie, he's sleep deprived, he's maybe got some issues going on. So then you don't know,
how deep it goes
and he joined, his kind of entertainment is going to these anonymous meetings, and just to try to feel some human contact and comfort, because again, this generation,
a traveler. What did he call?
Yeah.
A visitor. There was a name.
A tourist.
A tourist.
You're a tourist, Marla.
You're a tourist, Marla.
Well, you are too.
Yeah, well, you are too. Exactly.
Yeah.
So.
And so I think it's just Fincher's one of my favorite directors. So I think it's just, I think that's a really great it's just a great movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Pitt, I think Brad Pitt, I don't think gets the credit of being as good of an actor as he is, because I think he's so. I think people think he's just so handsome that he's
he's
sort
the
of
Paul Newman of this generation, where like people didn't appreciate his act. Like Paul Newman is such a flawless,
he's amazing,
he's one of the best actors ever.
Absolutely,
and like he just never got the credit for the longest time because he's so good looking, and it's just like. I get it. You're mad that he's beautiful and he's talented. I get that.
Right.
It is infuriating, but like it's magic to watch, you know.
No,
so
it
like,
is.
And so I feel the same way about Brad Pitt.
Yeah, and Brad Pitt's never been one
that he deserved as far as an actor.
If we gain an audience and have listeners, they will discover like I do have a lot of deep celebrity crushes.
Yeah.
Pitt has never been one of them. But
oh man, Pitt was my man crush for a million years. Are you kidding me?
Good.
Now Pitt is like transitioned into the grizzled handsome old man like Newman did when he was turning like 50.
Right.
So now my new guy is Chris Hemsworth.
Oh, okay.
So
well, there you go.
That's my
boy.
boy.
You like the pretty boys.
Oh man. Oh, he is pretty.
But I do have always appreciated Pitt and his acting skills, and I really feel he doesn't get the credit, and I think Fight Club is definitely a testament to that. Like he's just so amazing embodying that character of Tyler Durden,
right?
And I think Norton's really good too.
I didn't make you up to make myself feel better.
Right.
My favorite line in the whole movie. And there's a million great lines in Fight Club.
That movie's
a million.
Yeah, and like even
you are not a beautiful snowflake.
Like that's right. But even like Meatloaf, you know, you've got Meatloaf as Robert.
Oh yeah,
Paulson,
and you're just like, oh man, why'd you have meat? And then you're like, oh wow, he's really good.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Meatloaf's really great in it. Jared Leto's really great.
Oh yeah.
And you know, another one who I think he's starting to get the appreciation.
Well, yeah, but he does the thing that Pitt really would never do, where he would like. He'd gain weight or he'd lose weight or he'd like drastically change his looks or something like that.
Yeah. He's definitely been Mr. Method about his acting. So yeah, Fight Club's definitely one of my favorite movies. Right. I've watched it a ton. I've watched it, the commentary and stuff, and it's just a great movie.
The most romantic scene in maybe any movie ever is Marla and Tyler holding hands at the very end of the film, watching the building go down. I love that scene. All right.
I thought you were gonna say when Pitt like opens the door and he's like that bronze guy. He's like, "You want to finish her off?"
You want to finish her off? No, not quite that.
Okay.
Let's stop talking about killing people for a minute here.
Let's go with some romance.
Yeah, so I didn't want everybody to feel like all I like is movies about, you know, people getting killed, you know, so, which I like a lot of movies about people getting killed, but that's not all that I like. So, and one of my absolute favorites, and I feel like a movie that really encapsulates like what it is to have like just that wondrous experience when you're seeing a film is Amelie. Mm-hmm. So Amelie, you know, it's 2001, I guess. And like, I know that I watched this movie way too much. I almost feel like I speak French a little bit, you know, because I watch Amelie that much. Okay. Audrey Tautou in this movie looks pretty much exactly like Audrey Hepburn. Like pretty much and like I think Audrey Hepburn is the most beautiful woman that ever lived. So I'm just like modern Audrey Hepburn, because I don't have a chance with old Audrey Hepburn. She's not around anymore.
Right.
So, but just like it's just one of those films where like it's whimsical and it's magical and it like really sweeps you up into like the really wondrous parts of filmmaking where it just takes you completely out of your element and like takes you to this place that you never expected to go. I don't particularly like the French, you know, like I just don't, right? I talk to them on the phone sometimes. They're not the nicest people, right? Their films, I feel like, tend to be pretentious sometimes, you know? So like a lot of the things that they, you know, stereotype French people, I think are, you know, legitimate stereotypes. And so like I was not going in to a romantic, you know, like this is a romance movie. This isn't even a comedy. This is just a full romance movie. Right. I wasn't going into a French romantic movie, you know, with the idea that this is going to be like a movie that's going to make a real impression on me or like,
So
be something I
why
watch all the time.
So why did you seek it out? Because it doesn't seem like it's something you would see kind of on your own. Did you have to do a review for it? Or?
No. Well, I did do a review for it. So ultimately, I probably would have seen it anyway because it was like one of the big, like Oscar contending.
No, it
type
definitely
movies
wasn't.
And that year,
that early. It was 2001 when it came out.
2001. Yeah. See, memory's not too
Good
bad.
job.
And so, but like ultimately what it was is I knew that the director, Jean-Pierre Jeunet, had also done City of Lost Children and Delicatessen and some other films.
Okay, so stuff
that I really like. I really like the look of his films. Like he just has this. He looks at things in sort of a skewed perspective, and that's what I appreciate more about movies than anything else. It's like skewing my perspective and making me sort of see things, a different way. And so, like, I just always loved the way that his stuff looked, and I liked that it was really dark, and I'm just like, this is sort of a weird, but like, you see sort of some of the elements, in Amelie, and you're like, oh, okay, well, he's just making a romantic version of like all these dark, fantasy movies.
Yeah, because I haven't seen it. I did because I knew you were going to be talking about it. I did start watching it late last night and fell asleep. Not because I wasn't interested. It was just like 1 a.m.
Yeah.
But so I got through about the first 45 minutes, and but I really did like it. And you're right. It is kind of. I did like the narration, and it's sort of dreamlike,
right?
Where it's just this narration and it's this different perspective,
right.
and you understand she has kind of a different way of looking at the world,
exactly.
And it was just it's really, really lovely.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And and just so heartfelt and like. I mean, it's just like all meet cute and stuff like. So I mean, it's exactly what you think it's going to be ultimately, but like the path that they traveled to get there was just so like wondrous that I'm just like,
well, and she does
and I'm in love with her.
So she's just got
I will
this
never not be in love with her in that movie.
Yeah, ever. She's got a very beautiful, very innocent face. She's got those wide, big eyes that are very childlike and stuff. So she does kind of have this childlike wonder, at least the parts that I was seeing, just kind of this childlike wonder of the world.
Oh yeah.
And
because she's sort of been sheltered away her whole life. So yeah,
because of her heart defect.
Exactly, her heart defect. It's not really a defect. So.
Right.
But I mean, it's just like there's just so many little twists and turns, and like it just goes in so many directions that I just would never. I'm just like when she just starts like setting up all the people at the cafe and stuff, like I'm like, how is this even gonna? Like, how do you get to the end of this? But like, it's magical, and like his other films, especially City of Lost Children, because I know that's one that most of the people would probably have seen if they'd seen some of his movies. Just has this like it's a world, like you are living in a world, and so like I just feel like he does that really, really well, and he hasn't really done a lot recently, like. I was sort of,
I'm looking up his IMDb page right now, and it's like...
And the stuff he's famous for was the stuff he was famous for like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, like he's done stuff a little bit here and there, but...
Yeah, there's a couple of things, but nothing that...
Yeah. All right. Yeah, well, you have to finish Amelie, so...
Yeah, no, I will. I promise. But the next time we see each other, it'll be done. Because I was enjoying it. Like I said, I just... started it at like 1 in the morning, and so
I just saw it like when they were closing down. So they closed down the art house that we had here for many, many years, called Camel View in Scottsdale, Arizona. It was there for 50 or 60 years, and so the last week that they were showing movies, they were showing classic movies, and Amelie was showing that, and I went and saw Amelie so that I could know that I would see. Something special in that, because that's a movie theater that has a lot of meaning for me.
Yes. So. And now, and is Amelie one, do you feel like it's better on the big screen than on the small screen because it's such this kind of world that's been created?
A little bit, yes. I would say that there is probably a little bit of truth to that, but it's still like magical and wondrous if you're watching it at home, because I've done it a million times at home too. So I've watched it at home way more than I've ever seen it on the big screen. I've seen it on the big screen 4 or 5 times probably. So, but yeah, wonderful movie. Very highly recommended.
Okay. And so now, keeping with our romance theme and kind of these epics, I'm from the South. I'm from Kentucky, and so I do love these big epic movies. Now, I'm not going to pick Gone with the Wind. So being kind of a Southern girl, that tends to be their go-to
for sure.
But the epic that I really love stars Elizabeth Taylor, who I think was the most beautiful woman in the world.
Yeah.
Is Giant from 1956.
Oh, great movie.
It stars Elizabeth Taylor, Rock Hudson, and James Dean. And actually, it's his last role. Yep. He didn't get to see it. I think, if I remember the story correctly, when Dean died, I think they had just finished filming.
Yeah, yep.
So, and he was on his way, maybe, because I don't think he got to see Rebel Without a Cause. I think maybe he was on his way to the premiere of Rebel Without a Cause, and he was killed in the car wreck. But if you have not seen Giant is a really beautiful movie. It's long.
Yeah. It's long. I will warn you.
It's 3.5 hours. So carve out some time.
It's worth it. Totally. I'm not saying it's not
Absolutely.
because there's plenty of movies that are really long that are worth watching, and this is definitely one of them.
Absolutely.
But just know you're investing like 4 hours of your life into it.
Be committed.
So,
but I love Elizabeth Taylor's character, Leslie. She plays a kind of a debutante, high society girl in Maryland. And Rock Hudson plays this cowboy from Texas who owns a huge ranch. His name is Jordan Benedict. And he goes to Maryland to buy a horse from her father.
Right.
And they, during this weekend that he's there, they of course fall in love with each other because it's Rock Hudson and Elizabeth Taylor. Why wouldn't you fall in love with each other?
They did it plenty of times.
Yeah. And so he whisks her away now to this great expanse of Texas.
Right.
And
in the middle of nowhere, Texas.
In the middle of, like, they own, like, I think it's like
as far as you can see, pretty much.
It's like 1 million acres, I think is what they say in the movie. It's like just ridiculous amount of land to try to deal with. But like the scene that I love, I think it's one of the most romantic scenes in movies is like when they're going to Texas and they're on the train and they're laying in this train car together and they're just like looking out at the window at, you know, the vast expanse of Texas. And it's just like the wonder in her eyes. She's never been out of Maryland.
Right.
And now she's going to essentially this new world.
Right.
And it's just so great. Different. And they're so loving and just so great together. And the movie kind of picks up from there. Right. But it also, so it expands their life together. And James Dean is a farmhand that works on the ranch. Right. And they just, so it just kind of tells the story of their lives over decades. And
a long period of time.
It does say a lot about feminism. And, you know, she's being very kind to the Hispanic workers that are working on the ranch. And he's sort of like, he's sort of like, no, you don't talk to them. They're the help. And she's sort of like, no, they're humans. We should. And so she sort of, with her kind of open-mindedness, gets him to, but my favorite scene is like the men are talking politics and she goes in and starts offering her opinions. And he was like, well, don't you have somewhere to be?
Yeah.
And he's like, and she's like, no, I'm going to be here. I want to talk. And he was like, well, the men folk are having talk. And she's like, well, get my spinning wheel, girls. We got to, leave or whatever. And it's like, she's so sassy with him. It's great. And, it's just a fantastic movie. I'm in no way doing it justice because it's
I know. Yeah, it's tough to even
so
beautiful.
Well, and there's so much that happens and just like I said about class and women's rights, and it kind of expands their life and how they change. And
it sort of has to be as long as it is. So
yeah. So you get all this. Dennis Hopper's in it. He plays their child.
Oh, that's right.
Who there's kind of the big conflict there is like as he becomes a adult, he wants to be a doctor, and Jordan is just very much like, no, you have to run the ranch. You're the boy. Right. And his daughter, the daughter is Luz is her name. Yeah. She wants to run the ranch, but because he has this idea of like, no, you're supposed to get married and run off, and Jordan Jr. is supposed to do this. Right. And so there's some great conflict there on what our expectations are and how do we change that. And, and it's like there's a great scene where Rock Hudson and Elizabeth Taylor get into a fight as the children are older. And, and the son goes to Elizabeth Taylor and it's like, okay, Mom, tell Dad this.
Right.
And at the same time, the daughter's gone to him and it's like, okay, well, tell Mom this.
Yeah.
And they kind of have this great scene where they kind of discuss it. And it's just a great epic movie. I mean, Gone with the Wind, everybody knows, and it's fantastic. I'm not dissing Gone with the Wind, but I think
I prefer Giant. Too.
Yeah, I think Giant's just a better movie because you do have sort of these differences with how society turns, and you're seeing this whole life. Where Gone with the Wind is really about sort of this moment in time in history, where Giant sort of covers this whole family's life during this time from like the 20s up until the 50s. So
yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I feel like we've probably tortured these people enough at this point, right?
Right. Well, so we're going to end this. We're going to end each podcast with a section we're going to call Put the Remote Down.
Yep. Put down the remote.
Put down the remote.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, Shelly, put down the remote and watch.
And finish Amelie. Yes. Because we both, and our listeners may do this too, but I know I spend a lot of time kind of scrolling through trying to find things to watch. So we're going to tell you, put down the remote
and watch
this.
Yeah.
And so our recommendation for this week is to watch the movies we have talked about during this episode.
Any of these movies.
So any of these movies are well worth
classics,
your time.
They're well worth your time. Exactly.
Except
absolutely.
The Beast Within.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, maybe The Beast Within. You're probably right about that. Although Life Force is a wonderful film, and I will talk about Life Force at some point on this podcast.
Yes,
I promise you. I promise you.
Yeah, we'll have the...
I love it. So until next time, put the remote down, I guess.
Put the remote down. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.